and welcome to the second ever video podcast, Moley and Mascy. We're back, and there's a lot happening in rugby league. And before I introduce you to our guest, what we do here is we're recording the show, and it isn't posted till Friday morning, 8 o'clock New South Wales time. However, if you are a supporter, you get to watch it as soon as the editing's finished. So we'll put it up on a Patreon. So if you want to see the show early, make sure you support us. Patreon.com/White Line Fever. And I'll split that enormous pile of cash with this man. There's nothing in the pile of cash at the moment. Tony Adams. Tony, how are you?
Yeah, doing well, Steve. Just watched the Manly Penrith game, which was quite an interesting game of football here. We saw an old-fashioned kicking duel at the start of the second half when the scores were locked at 12-all, and it was like a brain explosion from Ruben Garrick going back to the 1970s. They kicked him the ball, the Panthers. He kicked it straight back to them. The Panthers said, thanks very much. They scored a try from the kick, and that was the ball game. So I don't think we'll be seeing too many kicking duels in the future.
Yeah, 24-12 it was at Four Pines Park, Penrith over Manly, and it was really bizarre. Sunia Taruva scored off the kick from Ruben Garrick, and you're right, I haven't seen one in a while, although I did hear one of the players interviewed at full time, and he said he thought that Latrell Mitchell did it last year. But that game sort of went according to plan, didn't it, really, even though Manly put up a good fight?
Yeah, it did. And you look at this whole round of NRL, and there's 8 clear favourites. Now, you and I have been around long enough, Steve, to know when there's 8 clear favourites, there's not going to be 8 clear winners. So there's going to be an upset somewhere. I thought there was a little bit of a chance tonight at Brookvale. I thought maybe Manly, with Penrith having a couple of players withdrawing during the week and having the minor premiership just about sewn up, could have been an upset. But if I had to pick an upset, I reckon maybe the Gold Coast over Cronulla. Who knows?
Now, let me tell you what's coming up, everybody. We're going to talk about the RLPA, Peace in Our Time, RLPA and NRL sort of breaking bread, and the fact that we heard players being interviewed tonight for the first time in a month or so as a result of that. We're going to talk about Challenge Cup final this weekend. Very exciting here in London, and the weather's sensational. Looking forward to a big weekend. We're going to talk about an amazing week of coaching appointments over here, led by Sam Burgess. Is that going to be a success? That's going to be our love-hate. We're also going to get tips for the NRL and also Challenge Cup and Super League and 1895 Cup and Women's Challenge Cup. So there's a lot to squeeze in to this program. And I just want to thank our supporters supporting us through the Nines Patreon. Vivek Nayak supporting us on White Line Fever Patreon. Richard York, Phil Rogers, Darcy Lussic. He's still there, Darcy, and supporting us through rugbyleaguehub.com long reads, which is a paywalled platform I do with John Davidson, where you get exclusive news in your inbox every day. Martin Parr, Connor Paver, Peter Stott, Gavin Wilson, Richard Dixon, Patrick Wilson, Ben Cavalier, Jon Wells off Sky. I assume it's the same guy. And 2 people who only wanted to give their first names, Andy and Matthew. Now, RLPA, Tony, finally we're hearing players did interviews after that game. Are you glad it's all over? We don't know the detail, though. All I said is we've reached an in-principle agreement. Haven't said what the agreement is.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see when it all actually comes out, won't it? Exactly how they managed to reach peace in our time, because for weeks and weeks it was just an impasse. It started getting very personal. They were hurling insults at each other. Last week, the NRL, of course, covered up their logos, as well as not telling us they're taking it one game at a time, the players. So, yeah, it will be interesting. And I guess there'll be a joint press conference and 2 slightly different messages coming from the 2 camps as to who won and who lost. So, yeah, interesting times.
Yeah, certainly interesting times over here this week, as I said, with Andy last being sacked, but before his press conference after Castleford lost, Daryl Powell being sacked. That was since our last program, I think, Tony, because we had a week off. And then Sean Long at Featherstone, they are leading the comp by 8 competition points, and he still got sacked. It's unbelievable. I don't know that happening in my lifetime anywhere at any level. And now we've had some appointments where Sean Long has gone as an assistant to Wakefield, and from down this part of the world, Danny Ward has gone up to take over at Cass for the end of the season. But the big one we're going to talk about, and I have to pause for the sound effects because this is our segment we call Love Hate. And today we're going to discuss the appointment for the next 2 years, starting next year, as the new head coach at Warrington of Sam Burgess. Love or hate, Tony?
Yeah, look, I'm a bit of both. I'm a little bit wary, I have to say. I have to declare an interest here in that I do a little bit of voluntary help for Warrington. I'm mates with Simon Moran and Carl Fitzpatrick, and I asked my opinion of things, and they actually asked me a few days ago about Sam Burgess and how he'd go, and I gave it a cautious thumbs up because to this stage, Sam's only head coaching gig has been with the Arara Valley Axemen, which is a small team for those who don't know it in England. Basically was financed by Russell Crowe up in northern New South Wales. They probably were getting crowds of 500, and I think they've actually folded, Steve, if memory serves me correct. So his resume is not glowing, but we all know Sam is one of the game's greats, and he's been on the coaching staff of Souths for the last few years. No doubt he's gleaned plenty of information here off Wayne Bennett, off Jason Demetrio. But my reservation about it is you look at the great coaches of the last 20, 30 years, they haven't been the great players. And you look at Wayne Bennett, average player, Tim Sheens, average player, Craig Bellamy, nothing special as a player. And the one I always like to go to when people ask about great players becoming great coaches is Wally Lewis, an immortal. I don't think Wally will mind me saying he was a terrible coach at the Gold Coast. And of course, they sacked him after a couple of years, and he was smart enough to realise it's not a gig for him. He never got back into coaching and carved out a successful career in the media.
It's it's very hard for us really to say, do we absolutely love or absolutely hate anything, even though it's the name of the segment. I guess we'll get there one day. I dislike the appointment. I think it's a showbiz appointment. I think it looks good. If you're a company, you'd say that you were making decisions for shareholders. And, Russell Crowe is obviously, always in Sam Burgess's corner and looking after his interests. And equally, I guess Simon Moran, as a music promoter, has a real good eye for celebrity, getting attention, publicity, all that sort of stuff. But when you look at the last couple of appointments at Warrington, they had probably the best coach available from Australia in Steve Price, I guess, or one of the best, and that didn't work out. And then they had the best coach available in the UK, in Daryl Powell, and that didn't work out. And so you do have to look at what's already there, and rather than what you're bringing in to make a change. So whatever has been a problem for the last two guys at Warrington, some of those problems will remain under whoever they bring in. If they bring in Wayne Bennett, those problems will remain. There'll be a lot of pressure on Sam to as a first-time head coach, to perform. But look at the last two guys who were there. They had experience with pressure. They both coached other clubs, and they couldn't deal with it. They couldn't make a success of it. So I hope Sam, is successful. If I was to put a personal spin on it, going to the Challenge Cup final this weekend, I'm sitting in the seats that were bought by my best friend, my pen pal from the age of 12, Jim Savage, who we lost in December. And at one point, I was really worried this year that they might win it in the first year after his passing for the first time since the 50s. And I thought that would be really hard on him, and it'd be hard for me to watch. I decided about 2 months ago that wasn't going to happen. So now I feel like I represent Jim a little bit as far as a stakeholder and as far as the decisions being made for the club. And I just think I just think this is another risk, and it's actually, as they get more desperate, they're taking bigger risks with the appointments. Daryl Powell was maybe a tiny bit more of a risk than an Aussie, like, who you could say, well, he's got proven, he's coached at the highest level in Australia with Steve Price. Now you've brought in a guy who no one thinks he's a good coach. They either think he's going to be a bad coach or they don't know. So, I think it's like a massive risk. I think if someone like Lee Breers, who's currently at the Broncos, if he'd have come back, he's just done such a determined apprenticeship as a coach, and he's a local boy, and he's on the way up. He's clearly on the ascent as a coach, whereas Sam Burgess is like someone who's just got into high school and he skipped to year 12. You know what I mean? So I think it's a tough appointment for all concerned.
Yeah. When it was done, Steve, the one thing I said to Carl Fitzpatrick as a word of advice, and I guess as a word of caution, is make sure you've got 2 assistants with him who are very experienced blokes. We don't want, guys Sam's age who he played with, who are his mates. Get 2 guys who have coached at that level or have been assistant coaches who can guide him through the tough times. And Carl assured me that would be happening. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Wow. So that's good social, as your producer, Tony, it's good social media clipping that you actually spoke to the club before they appointed Sam Burgess. I'm sure we can pump a few clips out there regarding that. So huge weekend here with Challenge Cup. They reckon they're going to get about 60,000. When Wembley reopened, they were getting more than 80, but I'm really looking forward to the day. Lee and Hull KR, 2 clubs you don't normally see in this match. We had Derek Beaumont in his, the guy whose name you don't remember, Tony, with the leopard skin jacket on the BBC this morning. It's going to be a really good weekend. Really looking forward to it, or looking forward to going out to Friday Night Lights for the Scholars, which they have some craft beer out there, and try not to have too much of a hangover for the next day. It's not an issue for you, Tony, because you don't drink. But I'm really looking forward to the weekend. The weather's sensational. Couldn't be happier. So I don't want to be too negative. I wish Sam Burgess luck. I just think it's, from the point of view of a decision, it's a risky decision. So let's go through some tips, Tony. An abnormal weekend in the Northern Hemisphere, but pretty bog standard, although with the finals around the corner in the Southern Hemisphere. Cronulla v Gold Coast. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, as I said, there's 8 games and 8 clear favourites. But if you're going to look at an upset, this could be the one. We all know that the Gold Coast got such firepower. Jaden Campbell at fullback's just playing the house down. What a pity they're missing AJ Brimson, because he really gives them some firepower too. Up front, they got Tino and David Fafita, 2 of the best forwards in the game. But having said all that, it's at Cronulla. Cronulla looked good beating Souths last week. That ended a 3-game losing run, and they got more to play for, so I'd have to go the Sharkies.
Yeah, really good game. Brisbane and Parramatta.
Yeah, and the Eels, like Cronulla, they've been up and down this year, and I think it's a bit of a grand final hangover. And I think if anyone's going to beat Penrith, it's going to be the Broncos, and they've got such strike from anywhere on the field, so much pace. I can see the Broncos at home winning pretty well.
South Sydney, it's a kind of traditional battle. This Charity Shield matchup. South Sydney taking on St George Illawarra.
Yeah, and they're struggling, South. They're in the 8, but they're struggling, and if they're not careful, they might even miss out. But the Dragons, they're showing glimpses of football, but they just can't go 80 minutes. And with Latrell in there and Cody Walker, who had a quiet game last week, I think South will get the money.
Next game, and it's on Saturday. Second game on Saturday. West Tigers against the Warriors.
Yeah, and the Tigers have actually taken this game to Waikato. So basically, they're going for the money. To me, it's a crazy move when clubs do this. They're basically saying we're going to sacrifice the 2 points, particularly when you're the Tigers and you would have struggled to win anyway, just to get some cash. No team needs a win more than the Tigers, not even the teams in the 8, because they are just at rock bottom. And at Waikato with Sean Johnson just playing the house down every week, I can see could get ugly even, a big Warriors win.
Third match on Saturday pits Sydney Roosters against the Dolphins, 12th versus 14th at Allianz Stadium.
Yeah, look, the thing about the Dolphins, Steve, it's their first year. They've hit the wall, but geez, they never give up, and you've got to give them a lot of credit. You know, Wayne Bennett and Christian Wolf, they've really put something together here, and I can see them next year doing really well, having signed a couple of players. Roosters been big disappointments. They've had a couple of decent wins, but gee, they're struggling, and I can't see them making the 8. I can see them winning this game, but not too many more.
Let's move to Sunday's matches. Melbourne against Canberra at Amy Park.
Yeah, and this is a massive game for Canberra and a pretty big game for Melbourne, who've been up and down a bit lately too. But at home, Melbourne don't lose many. Jerome Hughes, I think's in doubt. He might even be out, and that's a big loss for them. Puts a lot of pressure on Cam Munster. But yeah, I think at home, the Storm.
And finally, final game of the round. It's normal venues, as you'd expect, not off in the country or over the ditch. Newcastle at McDonald Jones Stadium taking on the Bulldogs.
Yeah, Newcastle. They're the talk of the game at the moment. 5 straight wins. 5 weeks ago, they were talking about sacking Adam O'Brien. Now he's almost a contender for Coach of the Year. And with all that in mind, I think we've got to go for the Knights. But I should mention, Steve, for those not in Australia, and who would have thought this even a few weeks ago, the biggest game of football this weekend in Australia is the Matildas against France. That's the game everyone's talking about. And I'll give you a tip on that too. Matildas 1-0.
Oh, there you go. Great tip. Good on you, mate. And okay, so it's your turn to throw a few games at me. And after this,
Yes.
we've got some listeners, viewers' questions as well. So we're going to finish the show with that.
All righty, let's start with Saints v Leeds women.
Yeah, big moment for the women's game, having the first ever Challenge Cup final at Wembley. Look, wish both teams plenty of luck. Interestingly, Leeds are paying their players now as of this year. So that was a big move, and it attracted some players from elsewhere doing that. Amy Hardcastle gone across there. I still think Saints, they're the best women's team. Jodie Cunningham leading from the front. She's a new captain of England. I'm tipping Saints in a thriller. Okay,
and in the men, Levy Halifax.
Yeah, that's the kickoff at about 2:00. So the women's game's on at midday at Wembley. I really been impressed with Lee. I thought Adrian Lamb did a great thing last week when he put in a full strength team and got a win. I thought that was fantastic. And I think just that momentum coming out of last week will allow them to edge Hull KR, who put in an understrength team and were heavily beaten last week.
Okay. Now, what's this Halifax v Batley 1895 Cup?
I'll tell you what it is, Tony. I'll leave that in. I won't cut it out. The 1895 Cup. The 1895 Cup is for teams that weren't in the running for the main final. It's basically for lower division teams, and it's on after the Challenge Cup final, which we would never ever do in Australia. It's on after the main game. But Halifax, I watched that last week, and they had a really good win against Featherston. So I'm going to support and tip Halifax in that. Okay, so I didn't do it at the start of the program. Like and subscribe. We need you to follow us so you know when we post new videos. We're going to do all sorts of new things, exciting things over the next couple of weeks on Tony's YouTube channel. And Tony, you got very quickly a few questions, and we'll wind up. Some questions from readers and viewers and listeners, whoever.
Yeah, I do, and most relate to tonight's game. Mark Anderson wants to know how many mistakes from Jared Sutton tonight. He counted 19. I'd say he's a Manly fan. I only counted about 10.
Half time was a bit of a mess, wasn't it? When he said they had another play, and then he got a tip from upstairs that no, they don't. Let's go to the dressing room. That was a bit of a car crash.
Yes, that was a bit bizarre, and we're having that a bit this year, where we're having the bunker and the referee having a little disagreement, and of course it's there for all to hear. So a little bit embarrassing. So a good question there from Mark, though.
And a knock on in the air before Crichton's second try. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of people seem to think that was a knock on. I'd have to agree. So there's two already off the top of our heads. Now we've got Alan O'Toole asking a very pertinent question. Do you think Josh Schuster is playing out of position at number 6? I think he would be better value in the back row. He certainly isn't an 80-minute player. And if you saw tonight's game, I don't know if you saw, Steve, but Schuster took an intercept. He had no one in front of him, and he kicked the ball. I think that sort of says it all. He's doesn't have the speed for 6. There's no doubt he's a quality player, but here's a little tip for you, Alan. I'm pretty sure he'll be playing back row next year.
On to the next one, Tony. I'll bow to your greater knowledge on that one.
All righty. This one from Chris Holmes. Are the refs involved in match fixing, or are they just incompetent? And I'm actually glad someone asked this question, because I want to stick up for the refs. I am certain there is no match fixing going on. I am certain refs are not biased against certain teams. They're just struggling, and they're struggling with their leadership. They're given these bizarre instructions on certain blitzes every week, even though they keep denying it. They're being given very negative feedback. I speak to a couple of referees, and they're not a happy bunch. They don't like the people who run the referees and who give them the feedback, and they're struggling. There's no doubt about it. And coming into the finals, it's a big problem. I don't know if incompetent is too strong a word. I mean, you look at the bunker and how many times they look at an incident and they still get it wrong. So, yeah, it's a worry, and something that needs to be fixed, certainly over the off season. We don't want to be changing horses now midstream and having blitzes on things, which we're seeing. And let's hope we get a good final series where the best team wins. Now, Steve, there's about 3 or 4 more questions here, but they are completely X-rated, so I'll have to cut them.
You can read them in the privacy of your own home, Tony. So that's it. Well, now don't forget, you've got to follow the other channel, White Line Fever TV, because this week's program will be on that. And we also do an audio podcast every week, so keep an eye out for that. Tony, it's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your weekend's football.
Thanks, Steve.